Hey guys, welcome to another episode of MTG Steam Brewery. Today, this is Josh, bringing you an Esper control deck that I came up with. I'll be doing an article over this as well. Should be going up the same day as this is, so go check that out on mtgbrodeals.com. And let's go ahead and get right into the deck tech. We're going to start off with kind of our Walker package. We're going to start off with one Gideon. He kind of really protects all of our other walkers. And unless our opponents are playing things like Path to Exile or Slaughter Pact, this guy's really hard to kill for a lot of decks. As well as against aggressive decks, he's just going to make them attack him. He's going to buy you a ton of time, and he can act as removal for things that you normally wouldn't be able to kill. Because sometimes you just don't have removal, or they are hard to kill with the removal spells you have. So Gideon kind of gets around that. We have one Elspeth, kind of a threat. It makes soldiers, so against control decks it's just going to keep generating soldiers. It can give something +2/+2 in flying. It can possibly kill someone very quickly. If you have like lingering souls into Elspeth, make a soldier, untap, flashback lingering souls, give something +2/+2 flying. They're on a very fast clock and they need to find a way to deal with not only Elspeth but the tokens you've already made. So she can be very good, as well as just against aggressive decks, making a blocker every turn can be very good paired with your removal and paired with other Planeswalkers on the board. We have one Jace, Architect of Thought. Also kind of protects our Planeswalkers, not quite as efficiently as Gideon, as he only makes the attack slightly worse, but he can also draw you cards by minusing against control decks, because sometimes you don't really plan to ultimate him, you don't think you're going to be able to, and plussing him doesn't really do anything, whereas plussing other Planeswalkers get to their ultimate will normally do something. But he can also just kind of act as card advantage when you really need it, so he's just kind of a nice 4-drop. Another Planeswalker, Sorin, generates lifelink tokens, can be very relevant against aggressive decks. He can -2 make Emblem. That can be very relevant in the control matchups when you go with, like, even just Lingering Souls, or if you just play and make an Emblem. Any Lingering Souls you draw after, your Elspeth tokens, the tokens that he makes if he survives, get very threatening very fast in a control matchup. And if you ever get to ultimate him when you have other Planeswalkers on the board, it's just kind of really funny to use your other Planeswalkers, -6 him, throw up your Planeswalkers, and reuse them. It can put you really far ahead sometimes. We also have 2 Liliana of the Veil, a super powerful card, demonstrated by its extremely high price tag and the fact that it's 4 of in Modern and Legacy Jund. In the control matchup, and just other against Jund decks and Jund-like decks that are just kind of grindy, taking away your hands is very good, especially when we have such powerful top decks as Sphinx Revelation, other Planeswalkers. And when we have other Planeswalkers on the board, we don't really need our hand, because we're making card advantage every turn off of all of our other Planeswalkers. So she'll be very good at that, because they not only need to kill her, but our other Planeswalkers. She can Edict, which is very relevant against aggressive decks. She's going to kill something, normally take up a Bolter and attack. Against Bogles, she'll be able to kill their hexproof guys, so that's also a very good reason to play her if you have those. If that Bogles is deck in your meta, in that case you probably want to be playing 3 or 4. And then her ultimate will normally just put your opponent so far behind they can't win. And then we have our creatures. 2 Restoration Angel, just kind of a very efficient creature, really hard to kill, having 4 toughness, doesn't die to Bolt, has 4 converted mana cost, so it won't die to things like Abrupt Decay. So it's just kind of nice to have as a threat against control deck. Sometimes if you just need a 3/4, and you just start attacking with it, and they have to answer it, or if they just counter it, you can untap and play a Planeswalker, which is very nice. It can also bring things like our Snapcaster Mage and Wall of Omens, our 2-drop creatures. Snapcaster Mage has more than proven its worth. Just a very efficient creature playing in any kind of blue non-creature based deck. And we have 4 Wall of Omens. This is kind of for the aggressive matchup. It's going to be a 0/4, so it's going to block pretty much everything an aggressive deck can throw at you and not die. As well as when it enters, it draws a card. So it just cycles when it enters. So against control decks, it's not really that dead either, because it's just a fine turn 2 play that says draw a card, and can stop them from just playing a Snapcaster and starting attacking you, so you have to use a removal spell on that, and not another threat later down the road. As well as if we blink it with a Restoration Angel, we get to draw an additional card, which is a lot more reasonable than blinking a Snapcaster Mage and flashing something back, especially when we only play 24 lands, so it's just kind of nice to have that window out too. Our final kind of 2-drop is Blind Obedience. Our 2-drop permanent anyway is Blind Obedience. We put this in here over a Go for Throat originally, because our affinity matchup was just terrible, especially when we did actually just draw Go for Throat. it did nothing, and we couldn't really afford to do that against Affinity because that matchup was pretty tough as is. This was just kind of, we put in the test and just kind of fill in for that spot, and it proved to actually be really good in pretty much every matchup. The Extort was very relevant, gaining back life, could give you several extra turns against sometimes combo decks. Against control matchups, the games just went long enough that you could kill them with a blind obedience. And against Affinity, if you play this on the play on turn 2, it can really slow down their draw and make them come out of their gates. That much slower is what you need. We have 3 Lingering Souls. We're considering going up to 4th. This card is just so good in every non-combo matchup. Against Affinity, this card's insane. The only thing that we can't beat out of Affinity is Etch Champion, and this beats pretty much every other card in that deck other than Master of Ethereum. Because most of their guys will just die to a 1/1, and this makes 4 of them. And they can't just Galvanic Blast the 1/1 and get it out of the way. And we also play Dismember and Path to Exile to get rid of things they have Insult Artifact. So it's really hard for them to attack us through Lingering Souls that way too. So this card is just kind of solid. In control matchups, we can discard this to a Liliana to make the +1 pretty much nothing, as we just get a flash it back. Or if you get to play both halves, so you get 4 1/1s against the control deck, that can kill them very quickly, because 4 flaying damage a turn is really hard for a control deck to answer on 4 separate bodies, unless they're playing things like Electrolyze. And even then, they've still just kind of 1-for-1'd, and then got to draw a card, so they cycled, which wasn't too efficient, so we're not too upset about that either. We've won Sphinx's Revelation. This card's super powerful, but it's also really mana intensive, and only playing 24 lands, we weren't sure that we wanted more than one, so we just put one in the deck, and we've been very happy with it. Especially since we can Mystical Teachings for it. The later the game goes, Mystical Teachings is very good in the control and Jund matchups, just kind of acting as a way to go search for one of your flash cards, Restoration Angel, Sphinx's Revelation, a counterspell, remove a spell, whatever you need. So just very nice, and it has flashback, so if you discard it to a Liliana later down the road, it's going to also be usable. So that's also very nice. We have 2 Cryptic Command, definitely very worth the triple blue in its mana cost to play in this deck. But we considered going up to 3, maybe 4, but we're sticking with 2 because it is triple blue. It can be hard to cast sometimes, and if you draw too many, it can just kind of get stranded in your hand. And we already have a pretty decent 4-drop slot packed into our deck, so we didn't really want to jam too many of these in here. So we have settled with 2. We have Dismember, just kind of a super efficient move spell. We can pay life if we need to, which makes it very good. It kills pretty much everything in the format, other than things with Pro Black and Etch Champion, which is protection from all colors. This will kill pretty much anything we need to at instant speed, and we don't always have to pay the life, which makes it that much better. So it's definitely worth having as a 1-of. Especially if we can Teachings for it and then cast it, even if we have to pay the 4 life, it's definitely worth it. We have 1 Esper Charm because I just really like this card. Destroying an enchantment in the main deck can be nice. You can Cryptic Command for it. I mean, not Cryptic. Mystical Teachings for it to blow up a pesky enchantment that's on the board if our opponent happens to be playing some kind of enchantment like that. Drawing 2 cards is very relevant in control matchups, and against some decks, especially the decks like Affinity if you're on the play, being able to make them discard 2 cards is normally their more powerful spells in their hand, and it's just going to make their draws a little bit slower, which can be very nice. As well as just, once again, something the Mystical Teachings for and blow up enchantments, pretty decent. We have 3 Mana Leak is kind of one of our 2-drop move spells, the other one is 2 Remand, just kind of some cheap early counter spells to keep things off the board. Remand also says draw a card, so it's kind of like Time Walk, which we're very fine with. It's good against a deck like Scapeshift if you get into a counter war. Having all these cheap 2-mana counter spells is going to be definitely good. And then we have 4 Path to Exile, just one of the most efficient removal spells in Modern. We definitely won 4 of these. Even though it is very bad sometimes to give our aggressive deck opponent a land, we definitely needed a way to just kill pretty much anything our opponent can play, as long as it doesn't have Pro White or Hexproof. And we have 1 Pact Negation, 1 Slaughter Pact, simply for the cool trick of we get some Mystical Teachings for these cards. So we can pay 4 mana, our opponent might not counter it or have anything to do about it, and if they Gitaxian Probe or Thoughtseize or whatever and think the way's clear, and they didn't take the Teachings, you can just Teachings for one of these cards and stop them in their tracks. Slaughter Pact is also just an efficient card on its own, so there wasn't too much need to argue against playing that card. Pact Negation is a little worse, as you have to pay 5 mana, but the fact that against a combo deck like Storm, if they think they're going to be able to do it, maybe they've probed you, they've seen you don't have any actual counter spells in your hand, you have 4 mana and a tapped land, just give Teachings for your Pact Negation and stop them, can be very nice. And we just kind of have our mana base. You can see the fetches are 3 Verdant Catacomb, and a Scowling Tarn and Mist Reinforced. I'd recommend playing Marsh Flats if you have any, but I don't, so I've just kind of stuck with these. We have 4 basics, 1 Plains, 2 Island, 1 Swamp, Path to Exile, and Ghost Quarter are still cards in the format. And our mana requirements are pretty easy, because white and black are kind of a splash. The only real thing is triple blue for Cryptic Command, double white on turn 4 and 5 for Gideon and Elspeth, and then if we really need it, double black for Liliana on turn 3. But that is not really too hard to facilitate with 5 fetch lands in the deck. And then we have our other lands. We have 1 Tar Pit and 4 Colonnade as our man lands. We just wanted a 5th man land, and Creeping Tar Pit was the only reason to have a Creeping Tar Pit in here. So we played 4 Colonnade and 4 Darkseek Swords to do the Jund thing, where they play their man land on turn 1 and their fast land on turn 2. They represent a ton of things, and that's just what we really wanted to do. So that's why we settled with that mana base, and we'll see you here in a second for the sideboard. Hey guys, welcome back to the sideboard. We're going to get right into it. We have 1 Consecrated Sphinx. This is kind of solely for like the Jund matchup and the control matchup. Where game 2, they're going to be siding out a lot of removal. So when you bring in your Consecrated Sphinx, not only is it a 4/6 that's really hard to kill with anything outside of Path to Exile or Terminate, assuming they even kept 4 of those in, it's also going to provide you a ton of card advantage as soon as your opponent untaps and goes to their draw step. Even if they do kill it, you're still going to draw 2 additional cards out of it and made them discard a card. Though that isn't super amazing, it is definitely still worth it, because if you get to untap with it twice, and if you get to untap with it and have counterspells, it can just take over the game by drawing so many cards. As well as it is a very fast clock, having 4 power. We still have 1 Geist of St. Traft for the control matchup, Jund match. Not the Jund matchup, because they'll keep in their Lilianas against us, but definitely against the control decks. And even the combo decks, where we just need a clock against those decks, this is a very efficient clock because it's hexproof and swings for 6, so it's really hard to kill. We have 1 Spellskite, just kind of an efficient catch-all card. It's good against Twin, Bogles, Jund, all sorts of decks, and it's just kind of nice to have access to this card. And so it's a 0/4 like Wall of Omens. So against the rest of decks, you can bring it in, you can block, you can redirect Lightning Bolts, you can redirect Path to Exiles from things like Restoration Angel or Celestial Colonnades to your Spellskite. So this is kind of a nice card to have there as well. 1 Potential Sphere is kind of a catch-all removal spell on our sideboard. Comes in against things like Keranos or Jund, where we just need to be able to kill some things that are normally very hard to do with, like Planeswalkers, enchantments, artifacts on the board that would otherwise be impossible to answer outside of bouncing with Cryptic and countering it on the way back down. We also have a 1 Terminus. This card's just a slightly worse Hallowed Burial most times, but since you can Miracle it for 1 white, it can be very, very good against other decks. So this will pretty much come in against any deck with Thrun, comes in against Bogles, Infect, sometimes Infect because you can Miracle it at 1 mana and they can't save it. So it's just kind of a way to kill their hexproof creature through all their removal. All of their hexproof things. Just kind of a nice card to have access to. 1 Lethal Vapors, strictly for the Bogles matchup. Doesn't really come in against anything else. Making them sack a creature once. They can normally get around that with their fetch a Dryad Arbor, but with Rebound it's really hard to get around it a second time. And if we go Liliana into Consuming Vapors, it's really hard for them to come back from that. 1 Supreme Verdict, just kind of a cheap counter spell. Slightly worse than Wrath of God in Modern, as it has the can't be regenerated clause, but it's very good against decks like Delver, Kiki Control, things like that, where you sometimes just need to be able to kill a threat they have on the board that's beating you, and this will be able to get countered by those decks. So just kind of what you expect. Supreme Verdict, Wrath of God is better in certain metas. And then our final cards are 4 Thoughtseize. This is for pretty much everything but aggro. Just kind of attacking our opponent's hand is going to be very good. In the Jund matchup, it's going to be very good. If we're on the play, we get a Thoughtseize or Thoughtseize. Or we can force them to Thoughtseize our Thoughtseize instead of taking a relevant spell, which will also be very good for us. In control matchups, it can clear the way for one of our threats, or it can just take away one of our opponent's threats, especially if we think our opponent has Keranos in their hand. This card can definitely answer Keranos, which we really need to stop from hitting the board anyway. As well as 2 Negates and Dispel for the control matchups. Comes in against Burn. Even Infect. These are just kind of ways to stop them from just pump killing you on the spot. Just some nice, cheap, efficient counter spells. Negate comes in also against a lot of things. Being able to counter non-creature spells can be very relevant sometimes. Some just kind of nice cards to have. And then we have Relic of Genesis, just kind of some graveyard hate. Very good against a lot of decks to bring in. Against Snapcaster Mage decks, you still bring it in because it says you get to play around it with your Snapcasters and Lingering Souls. You get to play those when you want to. Relic can also just draw a card if you really need to, so it's not really ever dead because it's just 2 mana cycle. So there's our sideboard. There was our main deck. There was a more control-y version of Esper Control that came out the day after I made this deck. Game off a top 16 in event with it. It is a much more control-y version. So if that's more your style of deck, say the blue-white standard elixir deck, it's very kind of similar to that in style. Maybe you should go check that out instead of this, which is kind of more of a board control with Planeswalkers to finish the game control deck. So if this isn't your style, that is. If that's not your style, maybe this is. So please enjoy both of those decks. And you guys have a great day. Hopefully we'll see you at the article. You can find us on Twitter at PearsallsBlog. You can read my articles, like I said, on mtgbrodeals.com. Or you can email us, pearsallsblog@yahoo.com. We will answer any questions you ask us, or at least respond to them. And we're not afraid to just talk to you guys if you want to talk to us. So, see you guys around. Bye. Have a great day.